Dog won't stop barking at book van. What police find inside leaves everyone shocked. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always awesome to see how far our stories are reaching. A bark, loud, constant, distressed. That darn dog again, grumbled Mrs. Thompson from her porch, clutching her silk robe. Call the police, Richard. I haven't slept in 3 nights. 3 blocks away at the Urban Cases Special Unit, Lieutenant Emily Harper stared at her coffee mug with the intensity only the sleepless recognize. With fair skin, icy blue eyes, and blonde hair tied back with military precision, Emily was known for her unyielding resolve and absolute loyalty to justice. "We've got another complaint," said Officer Ryan Mitchell, dropping a paper on her desk. "A dog that won't stop barking every time a book truck shows up in the neighborhood." "Multiple reports." Emily raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "And you're giving this to me? Because you've got Shadow. That dog has sniffed out drugs, bodies, and even lies. If anyone can tell us if something's off about a simple book truck, it's you." Shadow, the German shepherd with sleek black fur and eyes that seemed to read souls, lifted his head at the sound of his name. With a swift move, he positioned himself beside Emily, always ready, always alert. 20 minutes later, their patrol car glided through the wet streets of Maple Grove. Streetlights flickered, and the outline of a white truck, decorated with images of classic novels, stood out in a small plaza. "There it is," Emily murmured, parking carefully. Michael Bennett, the truck's owner, stepped out with a friendly smile. A middle-aged man with neatly combed dark hair, pale skin, and a voice smooth as velvet. "Officer, is there a problem? We've had complaints. Your truck seems to upset a dog in the neighborhood. A trained animal doesn't bark for no reason," Emily said, as Shadow hopped out of the car and began sniffing the air intently. Michael's eyes hardened for a split second, barely noticeable. "I've been here for months, never had issues. I just sell old books, nothing more." Shadow let out a low growl, his body tense like a coiled spring. He circled the truck, pausing by a wooden bookshelf visible through the open back door. "Mind if I take a look?" "Actually, yes, you'll need a warrant to search my property." Emily locked eyes with him. Something wasn't right. Shadow's instincts never failed. "I'll be back with one." As they walked away, Shadow let out one last sharp bark, a warning. At that moment, a book fell from the truck's shelf, not from the wind, not by accident, as if pushed by an invisible force. Michael grabbed it quickly, but not before shooting a cold glance at Emily. The next morning dawned grey, wrapped in a thick fog that seemed to cloak the city in an endless whisper. Emily Harper, dressed in her black leather jacket and her face hardened by lack of sleep, held a document burning with urgency, a court order to search the book truck. "Shadow, today we're finding out what you're sniffing," she said softly, petting the German shepherd's head. He watched her with absolute loyalty. In front of the truck, parked in the same spot as the day before, Michael Bennett waited with a carefully calm expression. He wore a crisp white shirt, dark jeans, and a burgundy wool scarf, as if the cold couldn't touch him. But his eyes betrayed him. A blink too many, a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. "Mr. Bennett," Emily announced, stepping out of the car, "I have a warrant signed by Judge Harris. We're inspecting your vehicle." The bookseller didn't speak. He just stepped back, spreading his arms in a dramatic gesture of fake cooperation. Shadow leaped into the truck with a nimble move, immediately sniffing among the shelves, boxes, and pages. Emily started checking the titles. Classic works, Dickens, Dostoevsky, Wilde, books neatly arranged, some clearly old, others carefully restored. But then Shadow stopped. He stood in front of a side section of the truck, where a shelf seemed to stick out more than the rest. He barked, scratching hard, until a faint metallic vibration sounded. "What's this?" Emily asked, examining the shelf closely. Bennett moved quickly. "That doesn't open. It's part of the frame." His voice had changed, no longer smooth, tense, too tense. Emily ignored him. With a crowbar, she pried off a false panel. Behind it, a hidden compartment came into view, lit by her phone's flashlight. It wasn't just dust and old books inside. Laminated documents, passports, cash rolled with rubber bands, 3 flash drives tucked inside hollowed-out Agatha Christie novels, and deeper still, photos. Photos of pale faces, hollow eyes. Some children, others teens, men and women with blank expressions, as if their souls had been ripped out. Emily felt the world pause for a second. "What is this?" she whispered, already knowing the answer. Bennett tried to run. He barely took a step before Shadow lunged with a fierce growl, knocking him down and pinning his wrist until Emily could cuff him. "You're under arrest for forging documents, possessing fake IDs, and what's likely human trafficking," she declared as he squirmed on the wet pavement. As the forensic team arrived to process the scene, Emily plugged one of the flash drives into her laptop, secured with forensic software. A series of numbered folders appeared. Inside, maps, schedules, lists of names, lives, lost souls turned into cargo. Shadow sitting beside her didn't bark. He just stared at the screen with that strange understanding only some animals have, as if he knew this was just the start. Night had fallen slowly, wrapping the city in a thick, icy gloom. The sound of distant sirens, the steady hum of traffic, and even the wind rattling the police station's windows seemed to whisper a name that never fully faded: Daniel Carter. Emily Harper sat in front of an old case file, in her hands the final report on her former partner's death. Car accident, vehicle skidded on ice, fatal crash. Each word was a knife. Nothing in that report made sense now that she knew the scope of what was found in Michael Bennett's truck. "You were looking into this, weren't you, Dan?" she murmured, her voice barely a shadow in the dark. Shadow, at her side, lifted his head, as if he too remembered his old friend. He'd been with Daniel on several missions. He knew him, felt him. The decision came without hesitation. At 3 in the morning, Emily crossed the police tape still sealing Daniel's apartment. The place had been locked since his death, a time capsule frozen at the moment his life ended. A faint smell of old wood, stale coffee, and dusty books filled the air. Nothing seemed out of place, yet everything was. Shadow moved slowly, sniffing with extreme care. Suddenly he stopped at a hallway wall. He sniffed, scratched, growled. "What's there, boy?" Emily approached, running her hand over the paint. A faint hollow echo sounded when she knocked. Minutes later, with a small iron bar and the care of someone disturbing a shrine, Emily removed a wooden panel perfectly fitted between the beams. Behind it, sealed in a vacuum bag, was a worn leather notebook with frayed edges and faint initials. DC. Her hands shook as she opened it. It wasn't just any journal. Every page was coded with references to books, underlined phrases, snippets of novels mixed with cryptic notes. Emily recognized lines from To Kill a Mockingbird, 1984, Crime and Punishment. It was a map hidden in the lines of great stories. Chapter 12, line 4, word 6. Mrs. Dalloway feared the garden. That's where they hid the names. Emily realized Daniel had uncovered something he couldn't say out loud. He'd used literature as a shield, a guide, a safe. Each note was a clue that, if read right, would reveal the inner workings of a carefully built network. On one of the last pages, she found a sentence written plainly, direct, raw. "If someone finds this, it's because I didn't make it out. It wasn't an accident. Patricia Sullivan is part of this, and I'm not just watching, they're hunting me." Emily's breath stopped. Judge Patricia Sullivan, one of the most respected figures in the justice system, untouchable, flawless, impossible. Shadow whimpered softly. Emily looked at him and nodded. "Now I know why you barked at that truck." Dan left an echo that's still ringing, and you heard it. As dawn began to paint the sky with shades of molten iron, Emily sat on the floor of Daniel's apartment, surrounded by open books, cross-referenced notes, and the journal in her lap. The fight was just beginning, and the enemies weren't hiding in shadows anymore, but in judges, courtrooms, and crisp suits. It was a Tuesday morning, one of those days that felt too calm for a city with so many scars. The courthouse's facade gleamed under a sun that didn't warm, a grand structure of white columns and blue glass windows. Inside, though, decisions had silenced the innocent and let the guilty walk free. Emily Harper crossed the lobby with steady steps. She carried Daniel's journal hidden in a black briefcase, along with coded copies. Her goal was clear: access the courthouse's central archive and find records matching the clues in the notebook. She needed evidence, dates, signatures, links that exposed manipulation from within. But there was something else, a gut feeling gnawing at her bones. Shadow, walking beside her on a discreet leash, seemed uneasy too. His ears were up, his eyes scanning every hallway, every face. "Agent Harper," a voice interrupted. "Good to see you." Judge Patricia Sullivan descended the marble stairs like an untouchable queen. Tall, elegant, with blonde hair in a perfect bun, she wore a light grey wool coat and gloves that shone with aristocratic polish. Her smile was icy. "Patricia." "Morning," Emily replied with measured politeness. "I heard you're working on the truck case. Nasty business, isn't it? People using culture to commit horrors." "There's more to it than meets the eye," Emily said, avoiding her gaze. "A lot more." The judge's eyes hardened for a moment, barely noticeable, but enough. "Be careful, Emily, some books are better left unopened," she said softly before walking away, her heels clicking perfectly. In the courthouse basement, dampness clung to the walls, and the hum of flickering fluorescents made the air feel almost sterile. Emily accessed the archives with her investigator's badge. She began sifting through files tied to the cases Daniel had coded. Altered rulings, missing evidence, vanished witnesses. Shadow paced slowly down the aisle between shelves. His body was tense, as if something invisible called from the shadows. Suddenly he stopped, his nose lifted. He growled. Then he bolted toward a plain metal door at the back. "Shadow, hold on." Emily stood and followed, drawing her gun cautiously. She opened the door. Behind it, a narrow service hallway. Dark, no cameras, just old stacked boxes, and a figure. A man in a ski mask and gloves, armed with a silenced pistol, stepped from the shadows. Without hesitation, he aimed at Emily, but Shadow charged with brutal speed, slamming into the attacker and sending the shot into the ceiling. The man hit the floor hard but kept struggling. Emily moved in fast, disarming and cuffing him with precise skill. "Who sent you? Talk!" she shouted, pressing her knee into his back. "You're too close," was all he muttered before passing out, as if his body gave up. Emily froze for a second, hearing her own breathing, her heart pounding. The smell of gunpowder hung in the air, and Shadow's eyes, still burning with adrenaline, searched for any other movement. The hallway fell silent again, but something had broken. It wasn't just an assassination attempt, it was a warning, a declaration of war. Back in her car, Emily recorded a voice message for her boss, Inspector David Brooks. "They tried to kill me inside the courthouse. No cameras, no witnesses. This comes from high up, David. It's not just corruption, it's a network with deep roots. And Judge Sullivan isn't just involved. She's one of the heads." Shadow lay beside her in the seat, still watchful. As the car's engine roared under the falling rain, Emily knew the game had changed. She wasn't just an investigator seeking justice anymore. She was an enemy of the system. The Federal Evidence Warehouse was an old building, its blackened bricks and barred windows set apart from the city's judicial core. Overgrown weeds hid parts of the walls, and the silence there was eerie, as if even time avoided the place. Inside slept forgotten evidence from cases never solved, or never meant to see daylight. Emily Harper parked the patrol car at the main entrance. Shadow, restless since leaving the station, let out soft growls at regular intervals. That wasn't normal. The dog's instincts were trained to sense more than physical danger. He sensed intent, evil, presence. "Just here to pick up documents tied to the Bennett part, okay?" Emily said, stroking his head. The archive manager, Robert Hayes, a middle-aged man with neatly combed grey hair and a sharp face, greeted them at the entrance with a flat smile. "Officer Harper, we were expecting you. The records are ready. Section C14. This way." Shadow didn't move. He locked eyes with Robert, his stare so intense it made the man look away for a second. Emily caught the moment. Every muscle in her body tensed, but she showed nothing. "Thanks, Robert. You lead." The hallway was long, lined with metal shelves and locked cabinets. A flickering lamp's buzz echoed like a sinister metronome. At the marked section, Robert stopped by a metal cabinet. "Here's what you need." "Let me open it." But before he could touch the lock, Shadow unleashed a deafening bark, raced to the back wall, and began scratching frantically. Emily spun around. In that instant, a new sound caught her ear. A faint click, electronic, precise. She ran to Shadow. The dog had found a hidden compartment in the wall, a black metal box tucked behind a grate. A small digital panel flashed red. Emily understood instantly. "Take cover, Shadow, it's a detonator." She pulled out her tactical knife, opened the compartment, and stared in horror at what was inside. A military-grade explosive, wired with a timer and multiple sensors. The setup was professional, not a clumsy attempt. This was a planned execution. Robert Hayes was gone, vanished without a trace. Emily grabbed her phone, sent a photo of the device to the bomb squad, and while waiting, began manually disabling the visible circuits. There was no time. If they waited, the whole warehouse would go up in flames. Thousands of pieces of evidence gone forever, like Daniel, like so many. Easy, boy. I've got this. Almost. Sweat dripped down her face. The last wire. Red or blue. Not a random choice. There was a pattern. She recalled something Daniel wrote in his journal. Red always lies. The truth is blue. She closed her eyes. Cut. Silence. Nothing exploded. Shadow nuzzled her leg, trembling. Emily dropped to her knees, breathing hard, her heart hammering. They were about to erase everything. The evidence, the names, the connections, she said quietly to herself. A tactical team arrived minutes later. The device was removed with extreme care. Emily handed over a digital copy of the documents found in the cabinet, new photos, audio recordings, and a list of bank transfers. Judge Sullivan's name appeared more than once. As the warehouse was cordoned off and agents scattered, Emily and Shadow returned to the car. The rain started again, soft, almost respectful. "We made it, Dan," she whispered, looking at the sky. "But this isn't over." The city slept under a blanket of fog that wrapped around streetlights and blurred the edges of buildings. Past midnight, the parks were empty, and the only sounds breaking the silence were the creak of branches in the wind and the faint drip of dew from trees. It was the perfect setting for an ambush, or for a confession that could change everything. Emily Harper moved through the trees of Willow Park, the spot chosen by the mysterious informant calling themselves the Librarian. Dressed in black, her tactical jacket hid her gun at her side and her badge inside her chest. Her senses were sharp with every step. She wasn't alone. Beside her, Shadow moved silently, his dark fur making him nearly invisible in the shadows. Only his eyes catching the moon's faint light gave him away. "Sure this is the place, Shadow?" she whispered, scanning the rusty benches, moss-covered statues, and the central gazebo where a dying lamp flickered. Her phone buzzed with a message. One word. "Here." Emily turned slowly. A hooded figure stepped out from behind the gazebo. Slim, average height, moving carefully. No visible weapon, but their steps were quick, trained. "You the librarian?" Emily asked, her hand near her gun. "Not he, she," came a female voice, young but heavy with exhaustion. The figure pulled back the hood. In the dim light, a pale face appeared, with grey eyes that had seen too much. Her blonde hair was tied in a messy braid, and her sunken cheeks told a story. Sleepless nights, built-up fear, a life in the shadows. Her name was Sarah Collins, former personal assistant to Judge Patricia Sullivan. "You worked in her office," Emily said, slowly lowering her guard. "For 3 years. I saw things, filed things. They asked me to shred documents, close cases. I didn't get it all, until I saw a list, names of victims, payments, signatures." Sarah swallowed hard. "And yours was on it." Emily frowned. "What are you saying?" "Patricia had you investigated. They thought Daniel left something with you. Then they realized he didn't. But you got too close. The attempt in the courthouse wasn't just an order, it was personal." Emily's heart pounded like a drum. The park's air seemed to thicken. "What else do you know?" "I know where the next transfer is, 23 people, right before dawn today. A distribution center disguised as a book warehouse, south of the city. I've got the coordinates." Shadow stood instantly as if he knew time was short, but before Sarah could hand over the device with the info, a whistle cut through the silence. A bullet grazed Emily's ear and lodged in a tree. "Ambush!" Emily yelled, diving to the ground and pushing Sarah behind the gazebo. Shadow darted through the underbrush, dodging shots that came from the dark like teeth of an invisible beast. 3 masked men emerged from both sides. One carried a silenced rifle, another a metal bar, and the third something like a signal jammer. Emily fired twice, hitting the first in the shoulder. Shadow tackled the second, biting his arm until he dropped the weapon. Sarah, against all odds, grabbed the fallen metal bar and swung it at the third's knee with desperate force. "Run, Emily. Take the device," Sarah shouted, tossing the flash drive into the air. Emily caught it mid-air, fired once more to cover her retreat, and called Shadow with a sharp whistle. Together they ran down the park's back path, vanishing among trees and bushes as the attackers regrouped behind them. 10 minutes later, in a side street, Emily and Shadow hid in an unmarked car. Her hands shook, but her mind was clearer than ever. She checked the flash drive. Inside were blueprints of the distribution center, names, dates, trafficking routes, everything, all they needed. But the most shocking was the last file, a video. In it, Patricia Sullivan sat with 3 businessmen toasting in a dimly lit room. "To a future without witnesses," the judge's cold voice said. Dawn fell heavy, almost liquid, over the industrial rooftops in the city's south side. Low fog, distant sirens, and a heavy silence ruled the area. Inside the mobile command center of the Special Investigations Division, Emily Harper stood before a digital map projected on a touchscreen. Surrounded by uniformed agents and forensic analysts, she gave final orders with a firmness that hid days of sleeplessness. 4 locations, simultaneous operations, no room for mistakes. "This isn't just any mission," she said clearly. "It's the end of a network that's lived too long among us, shielded by robes, badges, and stamped papers. Today we tear down the lie." Sarah Collins, now in a snug bulletproof vest, watched quietly. She'd given everything: names, times, hidden records. She wasn't just an informant anymore. She was part of the truth, and that made her a target. At 4:27 a.m., the teams moved out. At the site labeled Alpha, a seemingly legit printing press, they found forged IDs, computers with industrial encryption, and logs of shipments to multiple countries. At 4:31 a.m. at Bravo and Furniture Export Warehouse, they stopped 3 refrigerated trucks. Inside, behind hidden panels, were compartments built for human transport. But it was at Charlie, an unmarked warehouse at the end of a rural road, where Shadow found the heart of the beast. "Here," Emily growled, stepping out of the vehicle with her tactical team. Shadow smelled something underground. Nobody builds a basement under a paper storage for no reason. They used metal detectors and thermal sensors. A rectangular pattern appeared below the structure. Locked door, reinforced steel, controlled dynamite, 5 seconds, blast, dust, silence, and then crying. 23 people. Men, women, teens. Pale faces, sunken eyes. Some wept. Others just stared, as if they'd stopped hoping. One, a boy about 7, clung to Shadow with what little strength he had. The German shepherd didn't move. He let the boy hold him, still as a living statue. The air filled with something indescribable: relief, rage, compassion, and horror in equal measure. At 5:12 a.m., as the sun began to tear through the horizon, arrest orders came through. Judge Patricia Sullivan was detained at her private home in Lakeview. She resisted, demanded immunity, shouted threats, but the agents didn't flinch. She was cuffed with the same coldness she'd used to sign hundreds of rigged rulings. "You know who I am?" she snapped. "We know exactly who you are," Emily replied, not meeting her eyes. In the days that followed, arrests piled up. 42 people caught, 3 high-ranking cops, a prison warden, 2 local lawmakers, and the CEO of Bright Horizon Press, the Midwest's most prestigious publisher, which used its branches as fronts to launder money and move human cargo across borders. The media fallout was massive. Headlines in papers, news breaking regular programming, public opinion split, some in shock, others in denial, but the survivors spoke, and their words outweighed any political speech. Shadow was officially honored by the task force. He got a medal, but he seemed indifferent. His eyes followed only one person: Emily. To him, all that mattered was being at her side, and Emily. She didn't cry. Not yet. She walked through sealed files, marble hallways, and press conferences, but inside, a silent storm was starting to ease. They'd won, but the cost? That would be counted in time. Winter was slowly loosening its grip on the city. The snow, once harsh and heavy, now melted into puddles reflecting a clear sky, as if the city itself breathed with a bit more hope. At Pinewood Cemetery, under the shade of an old oak, a small group gathered by a simple white marble headstone, plain, without grand words, just a name, a date, and a quote: Daniel Carter. The truth doesn't need permission to exist. Emily Harper wore civilian clothes, a dark blue wool coat and a scarf that once belonged to Daniel. Shadow sat beside her, calm, as if he understood every moment. There was no band, no cameras, just those who knew what it took to reach this day. In her hands, Emily held Daniel's journal. The pages were now fully decoded. Every phrase, every literary reference, every clue turned into evidence. It was a map of horror, but also of courage, of a man who, knowing his end was coming, chose to pave the way for others. She knelt slowly by the headstone and placed the notebook in a steel capsule to be buried beneath the slab. I don't know if you can see me, Dan, but we did it. We found every name, every face. Shadow was your voice when I couldn't hear, and you were my strength when I wanted to give up. Her voice broke for a moment but held. Rest. Now you can. Sarah Collins, standing a few feet away, watched in silence. Her face wasn't the same. She'd aged years in weeks, but there was something new in her eyes. Dignity. She'd stopped being just a witness to fear. Now she was a survivor who chose to fight. Inspector David Brooks approached Emily at the ceremony's end. Tall, with light brown hair and a stern gaze, he was one of the few officials who hadn't bowed to corruption. I got the proposal you left on my desk, he said. Specialized training with German shepherds to detect victims at border zones. I'm not just approving it, I want you to lead it. Emily nodded, wordless at first. Then her voice was steady. I'll do it. For those we couldn't save, and for those still waiting. Months later, at a training center built on the edge of a western state, a group of German shepherds trained on special courses through mazes, mock hidden compartments, and modified vehicles. Emily oversaw each session with almost maternal care. Among the dogs, Shadow was the clear leader. The younger ones followed him like a silent mentor. Tell me in the comments, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Your opinion means a lot to me. A freelance reporter once asked why she didn't retire after the Sullivan case. She just smiled and said, because justice doesn't end when the last guilty person falls. It ends when the last innocent is safe. On quiet nights, when the center slept and only soft lights glowed, Emily often walked with Shadow through open fields. Under the stars in the vastness of the American night, she no longer felt the past as a chain, but as a beacon. And though her tears didn't come easily anymore, in the deep silence of the wind, amid the heartbeat and steady steps on the earth, she still wept. But they were dry tears, of honor, of love, of legacy. 2 years passed. The Sullivan case left a deep scar, but also marked a turning point in federal protocols for fighting human trafficking in the United States. Daniel Carter's name was officially added to the National Investigations Agency's Hall of Honor, not as a silent martyr, but as a pioneer in a fight that continued. His journal, preserved in an encrypted digital capsule, was studied by police academies and intelligence units as a model of ethical and creative investigation. Patricia Sullivan was sentenced to life without parole. At the trial, she tried to sway the jury, intimidate witnesses, even lie under oath. But every attempt was dismantled by the evidence Emily gathered, by witnesses who found courage, and by Shadow's unwavering gaze, present in the courtroom in silence, a reminder that the truth was never alone. Sarah Collins, under federal witness protection, rebuilt her life in northern Montana. She studied law, swore never to stay silent before injustice again. Today, she works as a lawyer for trafficking victims, helping at community centers and on international missions. Her name stays out of the papers, but not out of grateful hearts. Robert Hayes, the archivist who vanished from the warehouse before the explosion, was caught 7 months later trying to cross the Mexican border with a fake passport. He gave up more names, leading to the takedown of a second cell tied to the publishing network. He's serving a maximum sentence in federal prison. The boy who hugged Shadow that dark morning was named Ethan Parker. Today he lives with a foster family in a western state, attends school, and visits the training center every weekend to see his four-legged hero. His bond with Emily and Shadow is unbreakable. Emily Harper became a national reference for investigations with canine units. She turned down promotions that would have taken her from the field. She chose to stay where it all began. Her project, now called the Carter Shadow Program, operates in 3 states and has saved over 300 people in under 2 years. Shadow, with a few silver hairs around his eyes, still leads the operational dogs. His presence commands respect and trust, not just for his nose, but because he saw what many pretended not to, because he followed invisible trails where no one dared step. On the training center's wall, a bronze plaque reads, "Sometimes the bark no one wants to hear is the only one telling the truth." The story of Emily, Daniel, and Shadow isn't told in movies or bestsellers, but it lives in every rescue, every followed lead, every life saved at the last second. Because in the end, some victories aren't celebrated with fireworks, but with silence, with a relieved sigh, with a look between a human and her dog, knowing that at least for today they made a difference. And somewhere between shadows and unspoken words, the truth stayed. Thank you so much for sticking with this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a ton and motivates us to keep bringing new stories every week. And since you're here, take a moment to check out another one of our stories that's popping up on your screen. Big hug and see you next time. Stay well.